yeah, we thought it was a bit dodgy a few times, but ABC came through, the anchor came through, our plans came through, and yeah, it just seems really strange that we've only got 18 days left on the water before we spend 4 months out of the water.
Today is the day we are departing Cash Harbour and heading off on our 7-day shakedown cruise to Keckover. So things are a little bit haphazard and not shipshape on board ABC at the moment.
After 5 months of waiting out the winter storms and doing maintenance work on ABC in Cash Harbour in Turkey, we slipped the lines for a week-long shakedown cruise to Keckover, just 4 hours to the east. Unfortunately, our newly installed pre-owned autopilot failed 3 hours into the trip. But it wasn't a big deal, as we knew the area and had charts and GPS positioning on our phones as backup. At anchor, we spent 16 hours getting buffeted by 25 knots of winds, gusting to 35 knots. Fortunately, the holding at Keckover is outstanding in nice thick mud. After the shakedown, we went back to Cash Harbour, tweaked a few little things, and then headed around to Cash Marina to fill up the diesel tank before saying goodbye to our friends at Cash on Friday, the 26th of April 2019.
Well, this is it. We are officially beginning the next step of our journey. Yeah. Little short hop here now, about 4 hours.
Our first anchorage was near Kalkan, only 4 hours to the northwest, where we spent a pleasant and uneventful night anchored near to our buddy boat Acheron with Jim and Alex on board. The following day we continued further north to Karajaran. It is without doubt the most picturesque place we've ever stayed at. John, the restaurant owner, has mooring balls laid out in the small bay, and as we came in he was standing in his tinny waving us over to an unoccupied one. They're free of charge as long as you dine at his restaurant. We stayed 2 nights waiting for some wind, then went further west and north to anchor in the bay at Kujuk Kagikoyu. This bay is really just an overnight stopover point. There is nothing there as an attraction. Again, with no wind, we moved on to Buyuk Agakoyu, where Team ABC will perform our first line ashore anchoring manoeuvre. It went quite well, and this very pleasant bay offered us all the beautiful clear water, hiking trails, ancient ruins, and wondrous views we could need.
Oh my god, it's cold!
Okay.
The following morning we checked the weather forecasts, which showed strong wind from the north on its way. We decided that we'd take a 6-hour hop further northwest and anchor up in Marmaris Bay. This was also the place we were going to get our non-functioning autopilot repaired. After just 3 days in Marmaris, we continued following the Turkish coastline, this time in a southwest direction. We were heading to Bozucali, another beautiful anchorage that has 3 restaurant jetties that you can choose from to tie up to. The first time we'd visited Bozucali, we'd stayed at the first jetty to port as you enter the bay. This time we thought we'd try the jetty at the head of the bay. We stayed a couple of nights and then headed 4 hours northwest again to Dacia. After 2 nights at anchor in Dacia, it was another 4-hour hop to the ancient harbour of Knidos. There is a restaurant jetty there, but the owner is renowned for his grumpiness, so we decided to just anchor in the protected bay. The next leg of our journey would be the penultimate before we checked out of Turkey and headed to Greece. The 4-hour trip from Knidos to Gamuşluk was uneventful, and we dropped anchor in the small and crowded bay just as the wind was beginning to pick up. Our final Turkish hop was 3 hours to the north to Didim, our Turkish checkout town.
We've just dropped our anchor in 4.5 metres of water and let 20 metres of chain out here on the outside of this bay here at Didim. We are pretty much as close as you can be without being an obstruction to the entrance to the Dimarin Marina at Didim. We couldn't really get any further into this bay because it shallows off quite quickly. It is a dead calm, flat day, and hopefully it's going to stay that way. There are other options should the wind, weather and waves change.
Anchoring in the sandy bay just outside the entrance to the Domini marina, we drove our dinghy into the marina to find out what the checkout formalities were. We spoke to a guy at the agent's office in the marina, and for €50 he said he'd manage all of our paperwork, and as we were coming in to refuel, he'd meet us at the fuel dock in 45 minutes. Too easy. It was a sad moment leaving Turkey and all of the friends we'd made behind in our wake, but there was also excitement at what lay ahead. We were heading for Greece. In particular, a town called Pythagorio on the Greek island of Samos, where we'd be checking in. To break up the journey, we anchored overnight at the island of Agathonisi before dropping anchor in Samos the following day. Checking into Greece at Samos was a fairly straightforward procedure, which took us an hour to complete. We then spent the next 4 weeks at anchor, where we were heads down and bums up, writing blogs, editing videos, exploring Samos, filming more footage, and doing some minor maintenance on ABC. With a ton of work done, the summer beckoned us, but before we could leave Samos, we needed to tie up at the town quay to get fresh provisions and fill up with water. It had been 44 days since we last topped off our water. As we were unsure what facilities were available in the Greek islands ahead of us, we also went into Pythagorio Marina to top off the fuel tank. Our first planned stop was the island of Forni, but with 30-knot winds and crowded anchorage, there was no room at the inn. With the sun quickly heading to the horizon, we made a snap decision to go south to the island of Patmos. It was this first forcing of our hand that determined our route for the remainder of the summer.
You can make as many plans as you want on a boat, but sometimes, when you get there, you find that the bays are already full with other yachts, the forces of nature are working against you, and you end up somewhere where you didn't think you were going to be. Where are we?
Patmos.
Where should we be?
Funny.
Figure that one out.
It's a nice place though.
Our biggest challenge in the early part of summer was finding an affordable SIM card with heaps of data. Uploading videos and managing our social media presence really chews through gigabytes very quickly. From Patmos, we sailed east-southeast to Lipsi, just 2.5 hours away. Anchoring in the big bay took a couple of attempts because the bottom was thin sand over rock, but eventually our mantis anchor found what it needed and dug in. When we woke on our first morning at Lipsi, the wind had swung around, and as we were not too sure of how the holding would be when the wind picked up strength, we decided to motor around to the more protected bay at the south of the island. 30 minutes later we were dropping anchor in deep sand with 100% protection from the building wind. This was our first encounter with the infamous Meltemi northerly wind, which stalks the Aegean Sea all through the summer. We stayed in the bay for a few days waiting for the wind to drop below 30 knots and planned out a new route which would eventually take us west and north, with our ultimate goal of getting as close as possible to Athens in time for visits from our friends Shelley and Ian in mid-September. From Lipsi we sailed 2 hours south to Liros and anchored in Olinda Bay on the east coast. This island was where we had our first real internet data win, managing to buy 30 gigabytes of data for €25 on a wind SIM. The irony is that the next island we were going to had no phone or internet access, as there was only one family that lived there. It took us 6 hours to get to Levitha, which lies to the west-southwest of Liros. The most secure option is to tie off on one of the mooring balls in the narrow bay on the south coast. The mooring ball is €7 per night, or free if you take a short hike up the hill and eat dinner at the family compound. The next day was a 7-hour hop further west to anchor in the big bay at Amorgos. This anchorage gets very busy in the summer, and you must make sure that you anchor well away from the big ferry's turning area. They come in and out several times a day. We stayed anchored at Amorgos for 11 days, again catching up on editing videos, writing blogs and filming around the island, and also waiting out the Meltemi wind. A final overnight stop at a very picturesque anchorage in the northwest of Amorgos put us in the perfect position for a 3-hour motor northwest to the small but attractive anchorage in the eastern corner of Upper Koufanisi. As beautiful as it was, we only stayed for one night, as it was very open to the swell and very rolly. Certainly no good for getting a good night's sleep. Feeling bleary-eyed, we made an early start for a short 2-hour hop southwest to Skanusa. The big bay on the southwest of the island provided good holding in sand and, more importantly, a calm anchorage so we could get a good night's sleep. Feeling refreshed, the following morning we went further southwest and returned to the big island of Ios, which we'd visited on our way to Turkey. This time we chose to anchor in the big bay just to the south of the main port. We stayed at Eos for 6 days and managed to buy some replacement lines for both of our sails' furling systems, plus a cooking gas refill. We also met up again with Jim on our buddy boat Acheron and had a great time sharing stories of the different islands and anchorages we'd each visited since we'd parted ways at Samos almost 7 weeks ago. Eventually the wind changed direction and made the Eos anchorage we were in very uncomfortable. We made a decision to push further west to the uninhabited island of Polyagos. But once we stuck the nose of ABC out into the open water and found ourselves beating into the wind and waves, we decided that 7 hours of that wouldn't be fun, so we turned tail and sailed down to the big Manganari Bay on the south of Eos. After a comfortable night protected from the wind and waves, we upped anchor for a 4.5-hour sail to Foligandros, anchoring in the only viable bay on the mid-west coast of the island. The next day we had a small weather window which gave us a chance to finally begin heading in a northwesterly direction. Our anchorage of choice was on the northwestern side of Polyagos. The water clarity there is spectacular, protection from the prevailing wind is good, and the bottom is fine sand. We would have liked to have stayed there for a few days to explore, but the wind gods had other plans and shifted the wind to blow from the west, which left us exposed. With no other choice, we motored 3 hours west and entered the huge bay of the island of Milos. We hunkered down at anchor there for 6 weeks. We got heaps of work done, celebrated Ansha's birthday, changed out the old furling lines for the new ones, and once the wind forecasts indicated that it would be okay, we briefly tied up alongside Adamas Town Quay to fill up with fresh water and fuel. Finally leaving Milos, we motor-sailed 5.5 hours north to Seriphos, tucked into a decent anchorage on the south of the island, and checked the weather forecasts for the following day. It looked like it was going to be more of the same, so we took advantage of that and made another hop north to Kithnos. Arriving into the beautiful anchorage in the northwest sector of the island, we found a spot in the busy anchorage and got settled in just as the wind increased from 25 knots to 30 knots. We'd be staying put until that settled down. 4 days later, the wind dropped to a more manageable 15 knots and shifted slightly to come from the northeast. This was perfect, and we made the decision to skip our next planned island stop at Kea and instead go directly to the anchorage on the southern part of mainland Greece near Athens. We made good time, and 5.5 hours later we were anchored in Sunion Bay, overlooked by the ancient temple to the sea god Poseidon. Our quick push north meant we now had 10 days up our sleeve before meeting up with Shelley and Ian. Time for a quick mission to Athens to visit a chandler who was the authorised mantis dealer for the area. We wanted to buy a mantis chain hook. From Sunion we motor-sailed north into Athens Bay and anchored at Varkiza, which was a more convenient location for catching public transport to Athens. The timing couldn't have been better, as the day after we installed the new mantis chain hook on the end of our snubber line, the wind gods decided to put on a show of strength, with 3 days of 30 knots sustained wind gusting up to 37 knots. ABC never budged an inch. After things settled down, it was time to begin heading towards our rendezvous with Shelley and Ian, but first we were going to meet up with our long-time subscriber Nikos, and he lived at Porto Rafti, 6 hours away on the other side of the peninsula. Porto Rafti is a well-protected anchorage with all the usual amenities, and we had a great time with Nikos, who gave us a tour of the town and bought us a cold beer. September 19th rolled around and we left Porto Rafti to head east to Evia Island, where we anchored in Marmari just in time to watch the ferry coming in carrying our friends. We took them sailing back to Porto Rafti, onwards to Sunion, where we took some time to explore Poseidon's temple, and then finally on to Varkiza, where we said goodbye so they could head off to Athens before flying back to Australia. We still had 3 weeks left of our prepaid Greek cruise in tax, so we decided to do a little sightseeing before heading to our winter haul-out destination. Our first stop was the island of Poros, southwest of Kavori across Athens Bay. We anchored at Russian Bay for a week, managed to get some more work done, plus some exploring around Poros town and quay. We also wanted the weather to settle down and for the wind gods to finally make up their minds which way they wanted the wind to blow. They obviously couldn't reach a consensus because we woke up on the 15th of October to a dead calm day, and instantly decided to begin making the final hops of this year's journey. From Poros we motored to Sunion once again, staying only one night before heading back to Porto Rafti to meet up with our friend Nikos. 2 days later we were on the move again, this time heading northeast across the southern section of the Evia Channel en route to Strongilo. The next day it was still calm and windless as we motored 5 hours further north and west in the channel to overnight anchor at Eritrea. The following morning was cold, cloudy and breezy with 13 knots of wind, so we motor-sailed 3 hours through the sometimes shallow and narrow channel to drop anchor on the southern side of the Chalkis Old Bridge. Monday morning we went to pay the fee and register our intent to pass through when the bridge opened that evening. We got very lucky with an opening time at 10:30 p.m. Some opening times can be as late as 2 a.m. It all depends on the very unpredictable and unique tidal flow in that area. After passing the bridge, we decided that it would be best to spend the remainder of the night tied alongside the town quay rather than try and find an anchorage in the dark. From Chalkis Quay it was a very short 1-hour motor north-northeast into building wind to drop anchor at Artaki. The wind slowly increased, as did the swell, and made for a very bouncy night. We were thankful when it got light enough for us to lift the anchor and get out of there. We motor sailed 5.5 hours northwest to eventually tuck around the headland and drop anchor just outside the small fishing harbour at Theologos on the Greek mainland side of the Evia Channel. We spent 2 nights there waiting for the wind to lessen or change direction so that we could make our final hop northeast to the boatyard at Sipiada, just 2 kilometres north of the small town of Limni, on the second largest Greek island of Evia. Upon arrival, Harris, the yard owner, told us he couldn't haul us out straight away and recommended we tie off to one of his secure moorings for the night. The following day at 7 a.m, ABC was hauled out and made secure as we moved ourselves and our personal belongings into an on-site studio apartment. In total for 2019, we travelled 954 nautical miles, which is 1,766 kilometres or 1,097 miles. And that took us 6 months and 4 days. We visited 49 anchorages, 3 town quays and 6 fuel docks. Next year, as we continue in a general westwards direction, it's going to be a totally different kind of sailing. We'll be crossing longer stretches of water, there will be overnight passages, and who knows, they might have finally concluded the whole Brexit thing, which may or may not force us to rethink our plans. But you know what they say, the plans of sailors are written in the sand at low tide.